I used to work as a night security guard at a small old zoo on the outskirts of town. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was quiet, and I enjoyed the solitude. My shifts were long, usually from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and it was just me, the animals, and the stillness of the night. Most nights were uneventful, with nothing more than the occasional howl from the wolves or the rustling of leaves in the breeze. But there was one night that changed everything. It was mid-autumn, and the weather had just started to turn cold. The zoo was empty as usual, and I was making my rounds, flashlight in hand, checking to make sure all the gates and cages were secure. Around midnight, as I was passing by the old primate house, a building that hadn't been in use for years, I heard something strange. It was a low, guttural growl, followed by a soft whisper, like someone murmuring just out of earshot. I stopped in my tracks, listening closely. The sound was coming from inside the primate house, but that didn't make any sense. The building had been closed off for years, ever since a fire damaged the interior. No animals were kept there anymore, and the doors were always locked. My first thought was that maybe a wild animal had gotten inside, but then I heard it again, a whisper, clearer this time, almost like it was calling my name. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I decided to check it out. I walked up to the door, shone my flashlight through the dusty windows, and peered inside. The interior was dark and empty, just as it should have been. But then I saw movement, just a flicker of shadow in the corner of the room. I blinked, thinking it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, but when I looked again, I saw them. Eyes. Glowing yellow eyes staring back at me from the darkness. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Those eyes didn't belong to any animal I'd ever seen. They were too large, too human. I stepped back, suddenly feeling like I wasn't alone. The whispers grew louder, echoing in my ears, and I felt a cold breeze brush past me, even though the night was still. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind or my imagination, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I radioed my supervisor, telling him what I'd seen, but he just laughed it off, saying I was probably just tired and seeing things. Still, he agreed to send another guard over to check on me. While I waited, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I kept my eyes on the primate house, but the glowing eyes were gone, and the whispers had stopped. It was as if whatever was inside had disappeared. The other guard, Mike, arrived a few minutes later, and together, we decided to do a quick sweep of the building just to be sure. We unlocked the door and stepped inside, our flashlights cutting through the thick dust that hung in the air. The room was cold, much colder than it should have been, and the silence was oppressive. We checked every corner, every shadow, but found nothing. The room was empty, just as it had been for years. Mike laughed, saying I was probably just seeing things, and we locked up and left. But as we walked away, I heard it again, the whisper, faint and distant, but unmistakable. It sent a shiver down my spine, but I didn't say anything. I just wanted to finish my shift and get out of there. A few hours later, around 3 a.m., I was doing my final rounds when I heard the growl again, this time coming from the reptile house. My heart sank, but I had to check it out. I made my way over, flashlight in hand, and entered the building. The air inside was thick and humid, and the smell of the reptiles hit me immediately. I walked through the rows of tanks and cages, my eyes scanning for any signs of movement. That's when I heard it, a soft scratching sound, coming from one of the larger tanks at the back. I approached slowly, my flashlight beam shaking as my hand trembled. As I got closer, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The tank was empty, but the glass was fogged up, and on the inside, someone or something had drawn a face. A face with those same glowing yellow eyes I'd seen earlier. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my flashlight. The scratching continued, louder now, coming from all around me. I spun around, my flashlight beam darting from tank to tank, but there was nothing there, just the empty enclosures and the fogged-up glass. Panic set in, and I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. I was trapped. I pounded on the door, shouting for help, but the only response was the sound of the whispers, growing louder and louder, until it felt like they were inside my head. I could hear my name over and over, as if whatever was in there with me knew exactly who I was. In a frenzy, I searched for another way out, my mind racing with fear. That's when I saw them again, the eyes. Dozens of them, glowing in the darkness, watching me from the shadows. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead, and my breath came in short, panicked gasps. I knew I had to get out of there, but every step I took, those eyes seemed to follow, drawing closer. Desperation took over, and I grabbed a chair, throwing it at the glass door with all my strength. The glass shattered, and I bolted out, running as fast as I could toward the main office. I burst through the door, gasping for breath, my heart hammering in my chest. Mike was there, looking at me with wide eyes, asking what happened. I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. All I could think about were those eyes, those whispers, and the feeling of something dark and malevolent watching me. I quit that night. I didn't even bother collecting my things. I just left and never looked back. To this day, I still have nightmares about that night. I don't know what I saw or what was in that zoo, but I do know one thing: it wasn't human. And if you ever find yourself working the night shift at a zoo, keep your eyes open and your ears sharp. Because there are things in the dark that don't belong in this world, and if you're not careful, they might just find you.